Hi, everyone. It's really nice to be here virtually. And
Sarah, that's all right. I just need a second to get the video set up on this side.
okay, I can just talk about myself for a bit before going to next slides. But I used to go to Civic tech events a long time ago, like 6, 7, 8 years ago. I don't know, but Luke reached out to me about this event, and I'm really grateful to be here. I'm especially grateful to be here on budget day, which I think a lot of us have been paying attention to. And we snuck a little bit about the budget in at the end. I think are we ready for the presentation part on the video screen in person?
We are ready, yeah.
Great.
And we can see your screen.
Perfect. So about me, I've lived in Toronto since 2009, grew up in a small town. I'm a renter. I am anti-capitalist. I'm data curious. I put a bunch of stuff around who I am as a person there, because I think when we're talking about civic tech, it's really important to acknowledge the space that we're coming from, because we're all coming from a different space and we all have strengths and we all have biases, and it's, you know, being able to name those and know what we can give to a community and what we can seek out is really important. Professionally, I'm currently the senior marketer at Grassroots, which is a digital marketing agency that focuses on nonprofits and charities. I have done occasional political commentary in the city of Toronto for several years. I used to be part of a group called Women in Toronto Politics, which was fairly active during the Rob Ford years. I've worked at health charities, working on policy and digital solutions. And I also worked at the Ontario New Democrats for 3 years doing digital work. So a bit of a smorgasbord there. I also wanted to include this photo, which is what I used when I submitted a profile about me, because it's from the inclusionary zoning site of City of Toronto. It's like their FAQ video of what inclusionary zoning is that I participated in a few years ago, and occasionally someone sends this to me because they stumbled upon it and just ask, why are you there? And it's because I'm sure, like all of you, we just get roped into random nerdy things. This is not, you know, a super sought out thing. It's just on a very, to some, dry part of the Toronto website. But yeah, that's why I wanted to include that there. So what we're going to talk about tonight is how I'm going to go through some examples of projects that I've done that apply principles of community organizing to digital work, because I think a lot of this work can lean towards applying technology to social issues and civic issues rather than working on them together, or even applying, you know, social issues to technology in the reverse. There's, you know, a joke about Silicon Valley where every 3 years, someone in Silicon Valley reinvents what public transportation and libraries are with like some fancy new app, when, you know, they like those already exist. We already have great things there that are public and that need to be invested in. So that's where I'm coming from. I do have a list of resources at the back end of this presentation, which we'll share on Slack afterwards. There's a lot of different principles of community organizing theories. This one was a pretty good one, so I decided to include it. The only note I will put is it says to remain politically neutral, which I don't necessarily agree with, but I do think that some folks say politically neutral when they mean nonpartisan. So that's just something I wanted to flag, is that I have a lot of feelings on that, but I'm not going to dive into them today because that could be a whole other presentation. So the reason that Luke reached out to me was because during the municipal election, I threw together this cheeky web app called the Political Position Generator. I was working with Gil Peñalos's team for a few weeks. And as I mentioned, I've been involved in Toronto politics for a long time. And it can get very tiring to just say John Tory sucks over and over and over again, if that is something that you believe. It can also get boring even if you're saying the facts over and over and over again. So what I wanted to do was take something I know a lot of people can relate to, which is sort of what we call word salad type of announcements that are quite long, but don't really say too much, and let people have fun with it. So I built this app where you could input your name a neighborhood, list a Toronto attraction, choose your issue. You could also choose word length. Word salad was one of the length options, and folks had fun putting their positions on Twitter. So Sean McAuliffe had theirs, which was, I like to consider myself a champion of housing. It's something I hear from everyone, from the residents of Forest Hill to the visitors enjoying the Eaton Center. I'm committed to working with the provincial and federal levels of government to get housing done in a reasonable amount of time. This has always been and will continue to be a top priority of mine. I feel like we've all heard that announcement, and it's indistinguishable from a characteristic John Tory. And what would happen once you had gone through this process and had your little laugh was that you were directed to, and here's an alternative. Like, yes, we're all like, this was funny, but we don't always have to live with this. So that's what the app was. And what the community principle I was trying to really apply here was to meet people where they're at. Sometimes it's tempting to try to explain or make a case for something because you have so many facts in your tool bucket. You have a lot of receipts that you want to bring out. You want to bring out the year over year type of information that you have, but not everyone is going to be moved with that. Not everyone knows all of the background or the nuance with that. This is something I felt like everyone could relate to. And it was really about meeting people where they're at and showing instead of telling them, and connecting and engaging with them. So that's how I sort of applied the meet people where you're at community principle to an app. I used this app creator program called Adalo to make this, that has a bunch of templates for different apps that you can build yourself. This was initially, I think, a customer survey app that I just tweaked and tweaked and tweaked until it was something completely different, which was kind of fun. So the next sample I want to talk about is not the City Hall rally, but it's called the Position Primer. Sorry, the title here is wrong, but I'll fix it before we upload it to Slack. But in 2014, I was part of Women in Toronto Politics, and Rob Ford was the headline everywhere. The mayoral race, everyone was focusing on that. And people weren't talking about their municipal candidates, their councillors, because everyone was focused on the air that was Rob Ford, John Tory, Olivia Chow. And as a group, Women in Toronto Politics knew that it was really hard to find information and to be exposed to information about your city councillors. Some of them don't have websites. Some of them, will campaign really heavily in parts of their ward, but not others. So we wanted to build a tool that you could go and you could just put in your postal code and find everyone who was running and how to contact them and and where they stood on 10 different issues in their own words. And it was a very big and ambitious project, but it worked really well. And the community principle we sort of applied to that was taking the responsibility for maintaining quality and ethos, and not promising what you can't deliver. This was a big project. As you can see, this is just a sample of the Excel sheet we had on our end, where we were collecting all of the responses because we were making sure that we were doing our best. If the goal of this website was to expose you to every single counselor and try to get where they stood in their own words, we had to do our due diligence in reaching out to all of them. So we reached out as a group, and then we also asked other people to reach out to their counselor to fill it out. We had this very giant spreadsheet that it was automatically populated, but then we also did the due diligence before the spreadsheet that was populated, that was then tied to the website. We had like another in-between step where we made sure that no false entries were there. So no one could like submit, say Gourd Perks is there at the top. If there were 10 Gourd Perks entries, we would go through and like see if any were obviously spam, double check with the candidate that this is what they submitted. Sometimes they submitted twice and we noticed that, and we'd follow up and they say, oh yeah, I forgot to fill out this one section and then I remembered later. So we did all of that consolidating before it went to the public. So it looked very simple as something to use as a user, but I just want to emphasize that, you know, when we took this project on, we took on the responsibility of what this vision would be, and that meant doing a lot of due diligence and making sure that we could show people our work and show what we had done to try and make this work. And it was really successful. We got, I think there were over 600 people running in total, and we had like an 80% response rate of people filling this out. And, you know, this has become a much more common tactic in elections since then. The Toronto Public Library reached out to us. The city of, I think it was Waterloo, reached out to us to talk about, you know, how this came about. And so it's really neat to see a few years out that people actually use this quite often, or not this specifically, but sort of this kind of format. And it's much easier to do now than it was the year that we did it, because there's a lot more tools that make it nicer. This is the City Hall rally that I was teasing with the accidental typo beforehand. And this is when Doug Ford cut City Council. There was a rally the next day within 24 hours, less than 24 hours from that announcement. And that was a rally that was organized by myself and another woman named Riley. And what had happened was, you know, we had both been working on rapid response projects separately, and people connected us. And there was a Facebook page that Riley had started that was getting a lot of numbers and a lot of RSVPs. It was going viral. But we also knew if we're going to have a lot of people in one place, there has to be a lot of safety considerations put in, as well as, you know, the actual tactical parts of the event of who's going to speak, where are we going to get microphones, where do we need police permits, like all of those different aspects. So what we did was Riley was able to focus on getting and securing everyone who is speaking. And then I took on the sort of community management and safety part. And this was the Facebook page itself that was quite viral, was also quite active, with a lot of people posting their own ideas and some people, you know, getting into arguments. So it was really putting on a community manager hat and setting the tone for everyone who was going to be arriving in person, that this was going to be an acceptable space, similar to what Civic Tech does at the beginning of these meetings, is really set the tone. And, you know, just making sure that people, like even this example that I have pulled here was that we were seeking medical care and childcare. On site, we had water and like granola bars donated to us in case anyone felt sick or like faint, reminding people that, you know, it was going to be a sunny day and City Hall is a beautiful space, but it's not very shady. And I had reached out to a bunch of folks who would act as marshals, which were basically like, if you have any issues, please talk to these folks, because they're trained in sort of de-escalation and problem solving. And so they would have vests on. So that's how we kind of applied community principles of, you know, making sure that you're building a safe space using digital. So I would like to think that anyone who wanted to cause a ruckus realized that this wasn't going to be the space. The event went off really well. It got a lot of coverage. And if you've ever been to a rally or a protest, the biggest compliment I got, well, it wasn't the biggest compliment overall, but for me, everyone commented that, wow, you had so many speakers and everyone started and ended on time. That's never happened at a rally I've been to before, which is something I delight in. And then this one is a recent example with the YWCA. YWCA Canada has a fund for women leaving domestic violence situations, intimate partner violence. In my role at Grass Riots, we did their year-end campaigning and fundraising. And a big thing that we leaned into was this, what we call social media toolkit, and what, you know, a lot of digital and social media experts would call like an influencer program. But what it really is, you know, applying the principles of relational organizing in traditional organizing structures and applying how that works onto a social media toolkit. So the community principle there wasn't just relational organizing, that's really more of a tactic, but this was building on what already exists. You don't have to reinvent the wheel every single time. Knowing a social media toolkit is great use for other organizations, but also knowing for us that this is an issue that people were going to also not just want to be an quote unquote influencer posting about, but this is something that if you're trying to fundraise about, you might want to direct message someone or text someone. So we had all of those options in, and as well as having some folks that are in the field and quite notable that we had reached out to posting about this. And they all got to use the toolkit. So it was also super easy to use. It just took like 2 or 3 clicks and then you were done. So it was a very low lift ask for all of these folks we were reaching out to. And I'm happy to say that it worked really well because this is a client, I can't share their fundraising numbers or anything with you, but I can share that this is a toolkit. We didn't pay anyone to post about this or anything like that. And on the other side, one of the other channels we were using was a significant Facebook grant of $10,000 American. And this toolkit outraised the Facebook grant like by a lot. So this is really, you know, speaks to the power of not reinventing the wheel and applying relational organizing principles to digital work, because like Facebook, thank you for that grant money. However, this is what worked better in that situation. And then the last thing I'm going to talk about is, this isn't really related to any organization, but this is just something I stick my nose in quite often, is Toronto politics and the budget, which just came out today. I do help folks and organizations in private, help guide them through deputations and understanding the budget, and sort of using different data tools and visualizations to do some education around the budget, because it is an overwhelming document. And it also is, if you are someone who's spent any time in it, you'll notice very quickly that it is not that organized in and of itself. There's a lot of, if you go and you try to analyze budget items year over year with the Toronto Police, for example, and you sit down and think, I want to see like how the salaries have shifted. They don't have they'll list it as salaries one year, salaries and benefits the next year, salaries ampersand benefits the year after that. So then you have to do a lot of work combining them. It's a very big document. It's not very well put together, despite how big and important it is. And so I do a lot of work helping folks visualize that and get to the bottom of it, because even if you are very well versed on what the budget is, it can be very complicated. This is just a landing page I have of random resources on my website, including a budget deputation calendar of key dates in the budget. And I've also been doing the work of getting to know when different counselors and organizations are doing town halls and events where you can comment on the budget. So folks can subscribe to this and it has everything in one place instead of trying to look at it over a whole bunch of different places. As we mentioned, the myth busting bit, one of my favorite myths is, homeowners like to think that they have more share sometimes when they talk about the budget because of the property tax, and claim that renters don't pay property tax. But renters do pay property tax. It's just not its own bill. It's how your rent is worked out, is worked into that. Your landlord is paying property tax on the building that you live in, and that is included in part of your rent. And in fact, most renters pay disproportionately higher property taxes than homeowners. So just, taking a look at myths like that, demystifying the budget operating versus capital is, if you are not someone who loves to eat, drink, and breathe this stuff, it can, make you zone out right away. So trying to put it into accessible terms is something that I think is really important, that we should always be doing more of. And, illustrating how different programs contribute back to the city with capital funding, and how the capital fund works. And then here are some of the data deep dives that I talked about, where you can see the revenue versus expenses of each different. This is from last year's budget though, because I work full time and I could not do today's budget in the 1 hour I had between work and this, but I will be doing one for the budget that just came out today. But it lets you, explore things. You can sort this however you want. You can see how it's divided for each within here. This is the fun little salaries, benefits breakdown. I went through and I did an individual breakdown of a few different programs so that you can kind of get more of a sense of how these programs work, because not all of them operate the same way within the budget. So for example, this is as I mentioned, the Toronto Police budget. If we look at, Toronto Public Health, paramedic, fire services, all different. Public health definitely also relies on provincial subsidies. So that's a big part of that. If you look at Toronto's support, shelters and support and housing, they have one of the lowest for the amount of budget it is. The salaries and benefits, especially when you compare it to the proportions with the Toronto Police Department, are just completely I'm trying to find a nice word to say here, but it's ridiculous that you know, the folks that work in this system are such an afterthought, and other expenditures here. A lot of that is in the form of grant money to other organizations to pick up the slack, as well as a few other line items. So yeah, that is the community principle. I would say is, you know, empowering citizens to get involved, which is probably my favorite community principle, is arming people with information and tools so that they can go and do their own work. You know, I think that there's a lot of, especially when we're talking about the budget, there's a lot of folks who will say talking points and pull numbers, but they won't give you a lot of the context, and the context can mean everything. So I like to try and make everything as accessible as possible and really illustrate where things are coming from instead of choosing the best stat to make my point. And that's it for the presentation part.
Thank you, Sarah, for your amazing presentation.